This story is titled, I paid my parents $2,400 mortgage every month so they could keep their house. But on my daughter's surgery day, they stayed at my brother's barbecue. When I called, Mom snapped, "Your kid is not our problem." I hung up, removed my name from the loan, and by 9 p.m., Dad was screaming at the front door, "Your kid is not our problem." My mother said it on the phone while I was sitting in a plastic chair outside the surgical ward, watching two nurses wheel my 7-year-old daughter through a set of double doors. Sophie was wearing a hospital gown with cartoon elephants on it, and she was holding the drawing she had made for her grandmother so tightly that the paper was creasing at the corners. The doors swung shut. My daughter disappeared behind them. And my mother told me her grandchild was not her problem, because my brother was grilling steaks. I sat there for a long time after the call ended. The hallway was empty. Not quiet. Empty. The kind of empty that only happens in a hospital corridor when visiting hours have not started, and the only people on the floor are nurses and one father in a plastic chair with no one sitting next to him. I looked at the chair to my left. I looked at the chair to my right. I looked at the row of 6 chairs across the hall. All of them vacant. My daughter was behind a set of doors I could not open, and every seat in the waiting area was empty, because the people who promised to fill them were 40 minutes away eating brisket. My phone screen was still glowing with Linda's name at the top. 3 minutes and 14 seconds. That is how long the call lasted. That is how long it took for 33 years of loyalty to become worthless. The surgery was a tonsillectomy with adenoid removal. Not life-threatening. But Sophie was 7, and she had been terrified for a week, and that morning she woke up at 5:30 and went straight to the kitchen table with her crayons. She drew a picture of a house with a red door and 2 stick figures in the yard. She wrote Grandma's house across the top in purple crayon, pressing so hard the wax left grooves in the paper. She folded it twice, slid it into the front pocket of her overalls, and told me she was going to give it to Grandma at the hospital, because Grandma always says she does not have enough art on her fridge. The only thing she asked while I was buckling her into the car was whether Grandma and Grandpa were coming. I told her yes, because they told me yes. Because my mother had looked me in the eye 6 days ago and said, "Of course we will be there, Jason. She is our grandbaby." They were at Keith's barbecue. My brother had bought a $6,000 custom smoker and wanted to show it off to the neighborhood. My parents drove 40 minutes past the hospital to watch him smoke a brisket. I called at 11:15, 15 minutes before Sophie went under. My father answered. I could hear music in the background, laughter, the clang of a spatula against a grill grate. "Where are you?" I asked. "She is about to go in." Gordon cleared his throat. "Keith's thing started earlier than we expected. Your mother thought it would be quick. We will come by the hospital after. She is going into surgery, Dad, at his tonsils, Jason." His voice was flat, the way it gets when he has already decided that what you are feeling is not important enough to inconvenience him. "She will be fine. Stop making everything into a crisis." Then Linda took the phone. And she did not bother with the warmth. "Your kid is not our problem. She is having her tonsils out, not open heart surgery. Stop being dramatic and stop ruining Keith's day. We will see her when we see her." She hung up. No goodbye. Just a click and the sound of my daughter's name being called by a nurse on the other side of the hall. I put my phone in my pocket. I walked to the double doors. I pressed my hand flat against the glass and watched the surgical team prep the room through the narrow window. Sophie was already on the table. She was looking at the ceiling. She was still holding the drawing. Here is what my family does not know about me. They think I fix wires for a living. My mother once told a neighbor that Jason does electrical work, her voice carrying the exact pitch of someone describing a hobby that never quite became a career. My father has never asked me what commercial electrician means. My brother Keith once introduced me at a party as the guy you call when your outlets stop working. What I actually do is wire hospitals, data centers, and industrial plants. I have a master electrician's license. I manage crews of 12. The surgical ward where my daughter was lying had a backup generator system that my company installed 3 years ago. The lights that were keeping her safe ran through panels I helped commission. I keep buildings alive for a living. I kept my parents' house alive for free. When I was 25, I rewired their entire electrical panel. 3 weekends, 40 hours of labor. Their house was a fire hazard. The aluminum wiring was 40 years old, and the breaker box had scorch marks on 2 terminals. I replaced everything. I did not charge them $1. When I finished, Gordon walked through the kitchen, flipped a switch, and said, "About time." That panel has been buzzing for years. He did not say thank you. He did not offer me water. He looked at the new panel the way you look at something that should have been there all along. That same year, I co-signed their mortgage. The monthly payment was $2,400. That is what they told me. Linda sat at her kitchen table with the paperwork spread out and tears in her eyes and said, "Just until Keith's business gets going. He will help, Jason. You know he will." Keith never helped. 7 years later, I was still sending $2,400 every month to a mortgage company for a house I did not live in, while raising my daughter alone in a 2-bedroom apartment 4 blocks from the fire station. I need to go back further. Because the surgery and the phone call and the barbecue were not the betrayal. They were just the invoice. When I was 24, my wife left. She said the hours were too long and the money was too short, and she did not sign up to be married to a man whose family called every weekend asking for something. She was right about the last part. My parents had been calling me for repairs, for loans, for rides to the airport, for someone to sit with the dog while they traveled to visit Keith in his new house 3 hours away. When my wife left, I expected my parents to help me with Sophie. They did not. Linda told the extended family that I drove her away with that schedule. Gordon told me at a cookout, loud enough for his friends to hear, that a real man keeps his woman, and maybe I should have spent less time at work and more time at home. I was 24 with a 1-year-old daughter, a set of divorce papers, and 2 parents who used my crisis as a conversation piece. Nobody offered to take Sophie for a weekend. Nobody brought over a meal. Keith sent a text that said, "Rough break, bro. Hang in there." When Sophie turned 5, I planned a birthday party at our apartment. Streamers, a store-bought cake with pink frosting, 6 of her friends from school. I invited my parents 3 weeks in advance. Linda said they would absolutely be there. She said it with the same voice she used when she promised to come to the hospital. They went to Keith's lake house instead. Megan had organized a weekend trip. The lake house had a dock, and a new pontoon boat Keith had bought with money, I later found out, came from the HELOC. My parents chose the pontoon boat over a 5-year-old's birthday cake. Sophie baked a plate of cookies for Grandma the morning of the party. She stood on a step stool at the counter and pressed chocolate chips into the dough, one at a time, because she wanted them to be perfect. She wrapped them in foil, put them on a paper plate with a napkin, and set them on the windowsill by the front door. Then she waited. She waited while her friends sang happy birthday. She waited while they ate cake. She waited after everyone left and the apartment was quiet and the streamers were starting to droop from the tape. 3 hours. Linda texted at 9 that night, "Sorry, sweetie, lost track of time. Tell Sophie we love her." Sophie was already asleep on the couch with the plate still next to her, the cookies untouched, the chocolate chips she had placed one at a time, starting to melt in the foil. I almost drove to Keith's lake house that night. I sat in my truck with the engine running and Sophie asleep in her car seat and my hands tight on the wheel. I looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was breathing slowly, her mouth slightly open, her fingers still sticky from frosting. I turned the engine off and carried her inside because she had already been let down enough for one day. Meanwhile, Keith drove a $58,000 truck with his landscaping logo on the door. His wife Megan had a closet full of designer clothes she photographed for Instagram. Every Sunday morning, in the kitchen, I later learned cost $35,000 to renovate. Their house had a pool that cost $800 a month to maintain, and a patio with a built-in $6,000 smoker that Gordon called an investment in family. Keith called himself an entrepreneur. His landscaping business had 4 employees, operated at a loss every quarter, and had never once turned a profit that was not subsidized by someone else's money. But my parents never questioned Keith's finances the way they questioned my hours, my marriage, or my parenting. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with a window unit that froze in January and a hot water heater that gave us 11 minutes before it ran cold. Sophie and I split a bathroom the size of a closet. Her bedroom had a ceiling fan I installed myself because the landlord would not fix it, and the summer heat made her wake up sweating at 3 in the morning. My truck had 190,000 miles on it and a check engine light that had been on since November. I could have fixed it. I fix things for a living. But the diagnostic tool cost $200, was Sophie's dental copay, so the light stayed on. Every month I wrote a check for $2,400 and drove it to the bank and handed it to a teller and drove home and did not eat dinner until Sophie was asleep, because there were nights when there was only enough for 1 plate, and I always made sure it was hers. If you have ever been the person your family calls reliable while they give their love to the person they call promising, you already know how this ends. Subscribe to Family Secret Tales, leave a comment with your city, and stay with me. Because what I found at the bank the day after the surgery is the reason I will never write another check for that house. Sophie came out of surgery at 1:47 in the afternoon. The doctor said everything went fine. She was groggy, irritable, and asking for ice cream in a voice that sounded like sandpaper rubbing against itself. I held her hand while the anesthesia wore off, and a nurse adjusted the IV line, and the room smelled like iodine and clean cotton. Sophie's eyes opened halfway. She looked at me. Then she looked at the chair next to my bed. Then she looked at the door. Did Grandma come? She asked it the way a child asks a question when they already know the answer, but needs someone to say it out loud so they can stop waiting. Her hand was still in mine. The drawing was on the bedside tray, wrinkled from being held through the surgery prep, the purple letters smudged where her thumb had rubbed against them. Grandma had to work, sweetheart. Sophie looked at the drawing. She did not say anything else about it. She picked it up, looked at it for a few seconds, and placed it face down on the tray. Then she asked for ice cream again and closed her eyes. She was 7 years old, and she had already learned the thing I spent 33 years learning. That some people tell you they will be there, and then they are not. And the part that hurts is not the absence. It is the moment you stop being surprised by it. At some point during the afternoon, Carl showed up. Carl is a journeyman electrician on my crew, a quiet man who has never once asked me a personal question he did not need the answer to. He walked into the recovery room carrying a brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches, a bottle of water, and a portable phone charger. He looked at the row of empty chairs along the wall. He looked at me. He did not ask the question his face was asking. He set the bag on the chair next to me and said, I called the school and told them she will be out Monday and Tuesday. The office said they will send the homework packet. Then he sat down and opened a magazine and did not say another word for 3 hours. He stayed until Sophie fell asleep. On his way out, he stopped at the door and looked back at the empty chairs one more time. His jaw tightened the way it does on a job site when he finds wiring that somebody cut corners on. Then he squeezed my shoulder once and said, the panel job on 4th Street can wait. That was it. No speech. No advice. Just a man who showed up and handled the things I had forgotten to handle, and who had the decency to be angry on my behalf without making me carry his anger on top of my own. That is what an anchor looks like. It does not announce itself. It just holds. The next morning, I drove to the bank. Not to make the mortgage payment. To remove my name from the loan. I sat across from a loan officer named Patricia, who pulled up the account and frowned at her screen for longer than felt normal. Mr. Lawson, she said. The monthly payment on this mortgage is $1,600. I looked at her. It is $2,400. I have been paying $2,400 a month for 7 years. Patricia turned the monitor toward me. The mortgage statement was right there. Principal, Interest, escrow, $1,600 flat. Not $2,400, $1,600. I had been overpaying $800 every month for 7 years. 84 months. $67,200 sent to an account I now needed to see. Where did the excess go? I asked. Patricia typed for a moment. The overpayment was automatically deposited into a linked savings account held by Linda and Gordon Lawson. My mother had set up an overflow account. Every month, $800 of the money I thought was going to their mortgage was being routed into a savings account I did not know existed. For 7 years, while I ate frozen dinners and clipped coupons for Sophie's cereal and told myself I could not afford summer camp because the mortgage was too heavy, while I declined a company trip to a training conference in Dallas because $400 for a hotel room felt irresponsible when I was carrying $2,400 a month in housing costs for someone else's home. While I told Sophie that the school supply list was just a suggestion and bought her the off-brand crayons because the good ones were $3 more. $800 a month. My mother sat at her kitchen table and inflated the number and watched me break myself against it and deposited the excess into a savings account and never once looked at me like a woman who was stealing. I asked Patricia to pull the full account history. She printed it, 12 pages. On the 3rd page, I stopped breathing. There was a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, opened 4 years ago. Credit limit, $120,000. Borrower, Gordon Lawson. Under household income on the application, Gordon had listed a second income source. My name, my salary, my employer, my social security number. He had used my financial information to qualify for a $120,000 credit line on a house whose equity I had built with 7 years of payments. He did it without telling me. He did it without my consent. He did it by walking into a bank branch with a pay stub I had left on his kitchen counter during a Thanksgiving visit when I came over to fix his garbage disposal. I sat in that bank for 45 minutes while Patricia printed every document I asked for. HELOC disbursement records, the linked savings account statements, the mortgage payment history, the application with my information forged onto page 3. Then I traced where the $120,000 went. 4 disbursements over 3 years, each one a clean, documented transfer into a life that was never mine. $40,000 to Keith's landscaping business, deposited directly into his commercial account the same month he bought 4 new mowers and a trailer he posted about on Facebook. $35,000 to a general contractor named Rivera, who renovated Keith's kitchen with quartz countertops, brushed nickel hardware, and a farmhouse sink that Megan photographed every Sunday for her cooking posts. $35,000 of equity I built, pressed into stone and metal in a kitchen where nobody ever invited my daughter. $25,000 as a down payment on Keith's $58,000 truck, the truck he drove to the barbecue, the truck with the landscaping logo on the door that my mother called Keith's brand like it was a Fortune 500 company instead of 4 guys with rakes and a stolen down payment. The remaining $20,000 was withdrawn in cash over 18 months, listed as household expenses on statements that never once included a receipt for anything that benefited me or Sophie. My mother told me I was paying $2,400 a month to keep a roof over their heads. The truth is, I was paying $2,400 a month to build a credit line they used to fund my brother's entire life. Keith's business, Keith's truck, Keith's kitchen, Keith's pool. Every tile, every cubic yard of mulch, every piece of stainless steel in that kitchen was paid for by a man they could not be bothered to visit in a hospital. I almost walked out of the bank without doing anything. The old reflex was still there. The part of me that fixes things, smooths things over, carries the weight so nobody else has to sit in the mess. My hand was on the door handle. Then I thought about Sophie asking if Grandma came, and I sat back down. I told Patricia I wanted to formally notify the lender that I would no longer be making payments on the mortgage. I told her I wanted to initiate a quitclaim process to remove my ownership interest from the deed. And I told her that the HELOC application contained financial information that was used without my consent. Patricia typed everything I said. She printed the notification letter. I signed it. The clock on the wall behind her head read 4:47 p.m. By the time I left the bank, the mortgage company had already generated a delinquency notice scheduled to arrive at my parents' house within 5 business days. The HELOC account had been flagged for review, and my name was no longer attached to a single dollar of debt on a house I had been carrying for 7 years, while the people inside it called my daughter not their problem. If you have ever pulled the pin and walked away knowing the grenade was already live, you know what the drive home felt like. Subscribe to Family Secret Tales, drop a like, and stay right here. Because what happened at Keith's barbecue that evening is the part of this story I will remember for the rest of my life. I dropped Sophie at home with Carl, who had offered to stay with her for the evening without me having to explain why. He looked at the folder under my arm and the set of my jaw and said, "Go handle it." He did not ask what it was. He sat down on the floor next to Sophie and started building a tower out of wooden blocks while she narrated the construction in a voice still rough from the surgery. I stood in the doorway for a moment watching them. Carl did not look up. He just built. I put the bank documents in a manila folder. I placed the folder on the passenger seat of my truck. I sat behind the wheel for 2 minutes without starting the engine. The evening light was coming through the windshield at an angle that made the dashboard glow, and somewhere inside my chest the old machinery was trying to start up, the part that says, maybe you should call first. Maybe you should give them a chance to explain. Maybe this is not as bad as the numbers say it is. The numbers do not lie. The numbers never lie. I started the truck. I drove to Keith's house. The barbecue was still going. Cars lined the curb for half a block. I could hear the music from the end of the driveway, something country pop and loud, the kind of music people play when they want the neighborhood to know they are having a good time. The backyard gate was open. 25, maybe 30 people spread across a patio that my mortgage payments had helped build in ways none of them knew. Keith was standing next to his $6,000 smoker, holding a pair of tongs like a scepter. Megan was pouring drinks at a table decorated with mason jars and sunflowers. My parents were sitting in lawn chairs near the pool, laughing at something Gordon had said. Linda was wearing a new blouse. The price tag was probably less than the $800 she had skimmed from me that month. I walked through the gate. The conversation nearest to me died first. Then the next table went quiet. Then Keith looked up from the smoker and saw me, and his face did something complicated. He set down the tongs. "Jason," Keith said it the way you say the name of someone who was not invited. "What are you doing here?" I did not answer him. I walked past the smoker, past the cooler, past Megan, who was holding a pitcher of sangria with both hands and staring at me like I had walked in from a different planet. I stopped in front of my parents. Linda looked up. Her smile was already forming the shape of a dismissal. "Jason, honey, we were going to come by tomorrow. How is Sophie? Is she feeling better?" "She asked if you came," I said. "I told her you had to work." "Well," Linda said, adjusting her sunglasses, "we have been meaning to call. It has just been such a busy day." She gestured around the backyard. "You know how Keith's events are." "I do," I said. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the bank printouts. 12 pages, folded once, paper clipped at the corner. Gordon straightened in his chair. "What is that?" I unfolded the first page. The mortgage statement. I held it up so both of them could see it. "The mortgage on your house is $1,600 a month. You told me it was $2,400. Linda's smile dropped. "I have been overpaying $800 a month for 7 years. $67,200. It went into a savings account with your names on it." I set the page on the table between their plates. That is page 1. I unfolded the second page. The HELOC application. 4 years ago, Dad took out a $120,000 home equity line of credit. On the application, he listed my income, my employer, and my social security number. I did not authorize this. I did not sign it. He used a pay stub I left on your kitchen counter. Gordon's hand went to the armrest of his lawn chair. His fingers wrapped around the plastic and squeezed. "That is not what happened," he said, but his voice had already changed. The volume was the same. The conviction was gone. I laid the third page on the table. The disbursement record. $40,000 to Keith's business account. $35,000 to the contractor who did Keith's kitchen. I looked at the kitchen through the sliding glass door. The same kitchen Megan had been posting about for 2 years. $25,000 for the down payment on Keith's truck. I looked at the truck in the driveway, and $20,000 in cash withdrawals listed as household expenses. The backyard was silent. Not the comfortable silence of people finishing a meal. The airless silence of people realizing they are standing in the blast radius. A man near the pool set his beer on the railing and did not pick it up again. A woman at the far table reached for her purse and then stopped, as if leaving would be louder than staying. Keith stepped forward. "This is my party, Jason. You do not get to walk in here and make a scene because you cannot handle being second." "Second," I said. I looked at him. "You have a business funded by my mortgage payments. You have a kitchen built with a credit line taken out on equity I paid for. You have a truck financed with a down payment from a HELOC your father applied for using my social security number." I let each sentence land before I started the next. "What exactly did you build, Keith?" Keith's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hand was still wrapped around the tongs. He looked at Gordon. Gordon did not look back. Megan spoke for the first time. She was still holding the sangria pitcher, her knuckles white around the handle. "God, he is so exhausting," she said, loud enough for the tables to hear, but quiet enough to pretend she had not meant to say it. "Everything is a crisis with him." I turned toward her. "The quartz countertops in your kitchen cost $35,000. That money came from a credit line secured by equity that I paid for with 7 years of mortgage payments. So when you post your Sunday brunch from that kitchen, you are standing on my money." I paused. "Just so you know." Megan set the pitcher down. She did not pick it up again. Linda stood up. Her lawn chair tipped backward and hit the patio. "You are going to stand here and humiliate your family in front of everyone? You think paying a bill makes you important?" Her voice was climbing, losing the control she usually wrapped it in. "You are a handyman, Jason. That is your whole life. You fix other people's things and you call it a career. Keith builds things. You just keep the lights on." I let the sentence hang in the air. I let every person at that barbecue hear it. Then I said, very quietly, "This handyman paid your mortgage for 7 years, and you charged me $800 extra every month to do it." The neighbor closest to the table picked up his plate and stepped back. 2 women near the pool stopped talking. Megan set the sangria pitcher down and took out her phone, not to call anyone, but because she did not know what to do with her hands. Gordon stood up. He was taller than me, but he did not look taller. His shoulders were forward, and his chin was tucked, and his eyes were moving between the documents on the table and the guests who were reading them. "Every man in this family earns what he gets," he said. But the words were hollow. They came out the way a speech sounds when the speaker has forgotten what he was arguing for. "You listed my income on a loan application I never signed," I said. "That is not earning, Dad. That is fraud." Gordon's jaw locked. His hands came off the armrest and went flat against his thighs. He stood there with his mouth shut and his chest rising and falling too fast, and every guest in that backyard watching him shrink in real time. I picked up the documents from the table. I folded them, slid them back into my jacket, and looked at my mother. "You told me my kid is not your problem." I buttoned my jacket. "Good. Your house is not mine." I walked out of the backyard. The gate swung shut behind me. Nobody followed. By 9 o'clock that evening, Sophie was asleep on the couch with her ice cream bowl still in her lap. I was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, my phone face down, listening to the quiet of a house where nobody owed anybody anything. Then the doorbell rang. Gordon was on the porch. His face was red. His shirt was untucked. One shoe was untied. He had driven 40 minutes from Keith's house, and he was breathing like he had run the last mile. His hands were shaking, not the subtle tremor of someone who is cold, the visible, whole hand shaking of a man whose body has started processing a reality his mouth is still trying to argue with. "You are going to fix this," he said. His voice was shaking too. "You are going to call that bank and put your name back on that loan, and you are going to stop this nonsense before we lose the house. This is not how a son behaves." I stood in the doorway. I did not step outside. I did not invite him in. Sophie was asleep on the couch 8 feet behind me. "You owe us that much," Gordon said. He pointed his finger at me, the same finger he used to point at my face when he told me firefighting was a poor man's career and I should have been more like Keith. "After everything we did for you, after everything we sacrificed." I looked at him. I waited. Then he said it. The sentence he had been carrying around for years, the one he only said out loud because he was desperate, and desperate men stopped filtering. "Sophie has 2 parents. Oh wait, she does not. Maybe if you spent less time feeling sorry for yourself and more time being a man, she would still have a mother." He said that. About my daughter. On my porch. At 9 o'clock at night, while she was sleeping with a sore throat from surgery he did not bother to attend. I looked at my father, the man who used my social security number to fund my brother's life, the man who skipped his granddaughter's surgery for a barbecue, the man who was standing on my porch, bringing up my divorce to a 7-year-old's father because he needed someone to blame for the fact that his house was falling apart and the only person who could fix it had finally stopped fixing. I closed the door. I turned the deadbolt. I walked back to the couch, lifted the ice cream bowl out of Sophie's lap, and covered her with the pink blanket. Gordon pounded on the door for 11 minutes. Then he stopped. Then his truck started. Then the street was quiet. If this story made you feel something real, drop a comment and subscribe to Family Secret Tales. Every story on this channel is for the person who carried the family and got called selfish for putting it down. Now let me tell you what came after. The delinquency notice arrived at my parents' house on a Tuesday. Linda opened it at the kitchen table and called Gordon, who was at the hardware store buying a part for a faucet I used to fix for free. The notice stated that the mortgage was 30 days past due and that continued non-payment would result in formal default proceedings. The HELOC had been frozen, pending a review of the application. The monthly minimum on the credit line, which Gordon had been paying from the same savings account my overpayments funded, was now due immediately with no available balance to draw from. Keith's landscaping truck was repossessed 3 weeks later. The truck had been financed using the HELOC-funded down payment. When the HELOC froze, the payment stopped. The repo crew came on a Thursday morning while Keith was loading mulch bags into the bed. They handed him a clipboard, unhooked the tailgate, and drove the truck onto a flatbed while his crew stood in the driveway, holding rakes. Megan watched from the kitchen window, the same kitchen that was $35,000 of my money pressed into countertops and cabinet faces. Her Instagram went private that afternoon. Gordon tried to attend church the following Sunday. The pastor's wife smiled at him in the parking lot and said, "We are keeping your family in our prayers." Gordon sat in the pew for 40 minutes, staring at the hymnal without opening it, and left before the sermon ended. He did not go back. The men's group he co-led met the following Thursday without him. The deacon called and said they were restructuring. He thanked Gordon for his years of service and hung up before Gordon could respond. The neighbors on Briar Lane had heard the story from the barbecue guests, who told it the way people tell stories that confirm what they always suspected. The couple who lectured everyone about family values had forged their own son's identity to take out a loan. The woman who called her granddaughter not her problem was facing a mortgage she could not pay on a house whose electrical panel she could not maintain. The man who said his youngest son was not a real man was sitting in a living room with an untied shoe and a stack of letters from the bank addressed to both borrowers, one of whom had already left. Linda sat at her kitchen table on a Wednesday morning at 6. The overhead light was flickering. The ballast in the fluorescent fixture was failing. It had been buzzing for 2 weeks and getting worse. She used to call Jason for things like that. She picked up her phone, scrolled to his name, and stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. She set the phone down. She picked up her coffee. The light flickered again, throwing shadows across the table where she had sat 7 years ago and told her youngest son that the mortgage was $2,400 a month. The same table where she had slid the paperwork across and cried and said it was temporary. The coffee was cold. The light buzzed. She did not call. Linda called once. A Sunday morning. Her voice was different. Not angry. Not sad. Thin. The voice of someone who has been sitting in a quiet house for long enough to hear the sounds she used to cover up with noise. "The bank said we have 90 days, she said. "Your father will not talk to anyone. Keith is not returning my calls. Can you come for dinner, Jason? We can sort this out." She did not apologize. She did not say the word sorry. She did not mention Sophie. She did not mention the $67,200 she skimmed. She did not mention the HELOC. She mentioned dinner. The same dinner table where she used to sit and watch me write checks for a mortgage she inflated by $800 a month while telling me I was not doing enough. I almost answered. The old wiring was still there. The circuit that fires when someone you love sounds small on the phone and every trained reflex in your body says fix it. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time. Then I looked through the kitchen doorway into the garage, where Sophie's drawing was taped to the wall above my workbench. A crayon picture of a house with a red door and 2 stick figures standing in front of it. She had written Grandma's house across the top in purple letters. She made it the morning of the surgery. She was going to give it to Linda at the hospital. Linda never came. The drawing never got delivered. So I taped it to my wall, because everything my daughter makes is worth keeping, even the things that were meant for people who did not deserve them. I set the phone down. I did not call back. There is a morning I want to leave you with. A Saturday, 5 weeks after the barbecue. Early light through the side window of my garage. Sophie is sitting on an overturned 5-gallon bucket next to my workbench, eating cereal from a plastic bowl and watching me strip a length of 14-gauge wire for a job I am starting Monday. She has a fading scar on her throat from the surgery and a gap in her front teeth from a baby tooth she lost on Wednesday. She is wearing mismatched socks and one of my old t-shirts that hangs past her knees. Her drawing is on the wall above the pegboard, between my wire strippers and my voltage tester. The red door. The purple letters. Grandma's house. It has been there for 5 weeks, and she has not once asked me to take it down. Somewhere across town, Gordon is sitting at a kitchen table with a stack of refinancing applications he does not qualify for, in a house with a panel I rewired, and a roof I offered to fix, and a mortgage he cannot carry alone. The porch light is off. It burned out 2 weeks ago. Nobody called the electrician. Keith's crew quit when the truck was repossessed. His last 2 clients canceled after the equipment stopped showing up. Megan moved back to her mother's house in April, with both kids and a suitcase she packed, while Keith was at a meeting with a bankruptcy attorney he found online. The kitchen she photographed every Sunday is dark, and in a garage 4 blocks from Engine Company 14, under a light I installed myself. My daughter is telling me about a book she is reading where a girl builds a bridge out of rope and sticks, and everyone says it will not hold, but it does. She tells me the girl in the book is brave. I tell her the girl sounds like someone I know. Sophie smiles and takes another bite of cereal and does not ask about Grandma. She stopped asking 3 weeks ago. She does not need to. She already knows who shows up. The light in the garage is steady. The wiring is sound. I checked it myself. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing.